My first memory, in about 1957, I went down with my parents and they bought their first yearlings at that sale. The first horse we sold was through the draft of Trelawney's. My grandfather was a great friend of Seton Otway's, and they prepared it and took it to Trentham. 1956, we actually bought the property, and it was called Haunui when we bought it. The name lived on. Oh, I think the one that stands out in my mind is the last sale at Trentham, topping it with Kashmir King, who we vended on behalf of Annie Sart, and you know, it was quite a dramatic event, and we knew Patrick only had 4 lots left to sell, and Patrick couldn't head us off. Well, you know, the 3 that really stand out in my mind were Jeff Murphy. Of course, he was an iconic guy round the sales, very selective, kept to himself. Bart always had a team with him, and Tommy always had a contingent, and Tommy used to sit them all down in a row, and he'd then parade the horses. And I can remember one occasion where Mark brought out a horse and he started to lead it. He said, "Oh, son, come back here." He said, "My job's to train it, your job's to show it to me." And, you know, Trista Mantico, I remember at the time saying to Tommy, "Was this one going to be for me, Tom?" And he said, "If you don't shut up, you won't get a horse." Different today. I'll go back to Kashmir King. There was a great story about that. Tai Chung Beng had Mrs. Tan, and the Tans were just at corner of the silver market in Indonesia, and she came before the horse went through the ring. Tai Chung Beng had to get on the plane to fly home, but he wanted to buy the horse, so he had a picture taken of the horse with Mrs. Tan standing beside. We never knew till afterwards that she had a large black or brown satchel she was carrying. She bought the horse and went round to the back of the box, and out of the box she paid for it. Well, Michael Floyd, he just didn't know how to take that.
In cash? In
cash. 750,000, that's a lot of money in those days. Oh, well, Michael Floyd was head of Roy Stevenson's in those days, and you know, he was in Wellington, but there'd been a move on for some time by a lot of Aucklanders trying to persuade them to bring the sales to Auckland, and they looked at Ellerslie and they looked at the showgrounds, and anyhow, when Michael bought this property, it was a Hereford stud, it was pretty wet, and in the finish he said to, "Well, we've got to do all the fencing, would you be interested in helping with that?" I said, "Well, I've got a very good fencer." Rowan Crisp was his name, and Michael said, "Well, the job's yours." So all the fencing you see in the older part of were built by Rowan Crisp and myself. And the other thing that, you know, the trees that you see around our block, we planted those ourselves, and they were a curse for a long time when there was no block, A block, and they used to have a tent city over there with all these sideshows, and the trees would rattle and the horses would take off. We now appreciate all those years later actually what the shades meant for us. Yeah. Well, you know, it's grown like topsy, you might say. My father, my grandfather was the original owner, my mother's father, and she had the one mare, and when Dad died, or Dad died, we had 5 brood mares, and it built from that. And you know, I was very fortunate. I married Carolyn, and her family was steeped in tradition. You know, he did give us the first few catalogues from the Trentham sale, well, from the Yearling sales, of course. And then Mark came along, and he once told me I made him be a veterinarian, but I don't think he's ever regretted it. And you know, it's a family operation. We're all involved, and you know, Mark's family now are involved. I'm sure they're not going to be allowed to run the farm. They'll do other things as well, but they're all deeply involved, and it's always been a family affair.
I think I had my first truck ride, so from Whitford to Trentham, I think when I was 14. I used to, you know, work around the stables and lead then, but I wasn't allowed to. I stayed in the city in Wellington, and I think when I was 16, I stayed at Olga's, which is an infamous house where a lady opened up her home. I think we had about 20 people staying there, mainly from the Auckland area. We used to, you know, over the railway line and through the racehorse paddocks to the stables, at different, in varying degrees of cohesion, I suppose, at 5 o'clock in the morning. because the tyre wasn't that far away. And yeah, I think I got into my first pub at 16, being a fresh-faced young Auckland boy. Yeah, well, back in the day, I mean, I take my hat off to Inglewood and White Robe, and that they still do that today, having to come to Karaka. So, you know, real hats off to those guys, both at Downs as well. But yeah, we used to load out 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was always night. We'd arrive probably in Wellingtons, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning. A couple of very memorables was I travelled with a group of fillies on one of the trucks, one of the big Arctics, and on the desert road we got a blowout, and the gentleman I was travelling with, he couldn't wake him, and so the truck driver and I, inside tyre, full load of fillies on, couldn't take them off, had to change that tyre, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then another time we arrived at Trentham, and one of the guys fainted getting off the truck. No use to us, we're skeleton staff trying to get yearlings into boxes and all those sorts of things. So they were great memories. They shaped probably a lot of the people that are now vending in their, you know, in their 50s and 60s here at Karaka. The requirements for what the buyers wish for today, you know, from x-rays and scopes to beyond the physical inspection, the pedigree analysis. Pedigree analysis was probably all still pretty big, but I think back in the day, the half-brother or the half-sister to the really good horse were the horses that were finding the top end of the market. Now it's all about type and the stallions in particular. And there's a lot, I think there's I remember, you know, a couple of the, John Peatfield in particular, you know, there were probably 3, 4, 5 people that, you know, sort of, you'd probably say really knew what they were looking at in terms of a potential athlete going forward. Now there's 30 or 40 people that, because they've all trained under the different people that have allowed them to inspect yearlings. So
at 2,400,000, I'll take that 50 before she goes. Once, twice, third and final. 2,400,000. Thank you very much. Thank you, underbidders. Guy Mulcaster, the buyer. Please, ladies and gentlemen, just hold your round of applause. Just give the filly a chance to walk out. Outstanding, outstanding. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Got another horse in the ring. Outstanding. That is a career highlight, I can tell you.
Well, it actually started 12 months before because, as you know, with Barneswood, they buy yearlings, they race horses and they breed, and they don't always breed to sell. And we had an opportunity to possibly take one of them to the market, so that was that filly. But there's just the stars aligned. Savabeel, Karaka Million Night, Orchestral, Karaka Million Night, the type of filly, you know, all the extras, the scopes, the videos, the temperament, it all just, you know, it came together for a watershed moment, and you know, wonderful to be part of it, and very thankful to the Greens for allowing us to sell her. So yeah, no, it was a special moment. Not an easy gig, and you know, there's the blood, sweat and tears that everyone goes through. You know, you have a, you know, you go through a breeding season. You know, you have successes, you have losses that you have to soak up. So 2.5, you know, we're going to go into Karaka 2026, and 2.5 years ago, breeders were making decisions on what stallions they were breeding to, and then those pedigrees get embellished. So, you know, you will take 42 yearlings to Karaka 2026, and it's the grand final for them. I've got a really even draft of horses, predominantly by proven size. You know, we've got an Animo colt who's a close relation to Melody Bell, and obviously this year's 2000 Guineas winner Romanoff. But I've got, I'm sort of a secondary Waikato ritual, because I've got plenty of Poissiers, Satonos, Super Seths. So really nice horses amongst them. No, I don't think, no superstars, but a really good draft of horses. You know, we're coming off the back of, you know, 2024, where, you know, I think we could potentially have 5 horses in the Karaka Million as graduates, and they range from Lollapalooza at 30,000 and War Princess and Romanoff through to He Who Dares, who made 825. So for everyone playing the game, we want the market to be right for all of our horses. Thankfully it's not, because otherwise we wouldn't sell the Lollapaloozas for 30,000 they wouldn't happen. But you need the whole spectrum, and what keeps people coming back is success. And Karaka has been, and Trentham was as well. High class racehorses come out of this sales system. That, you know, I remember Gordy Cunningham said, a buyer can come to Karaka and they can go through every barn from A to I and find that there have been Group 1 horses come out of every barn, and that's pretty special.